Imagine standing at the edge of a storm, dark clouds swirling, lightning crackling overhead, and knowing you have the power not just to weather it, but to transform it into your own weather pattern of calm and clarity. Welcome, friends. Today we're tackling one of life's greatest challenges, toxic people. You know them. The energy vampires, the constant critics, the emotional bullies who drain your spirit and cloud your vision. But here's the truth. You don't have to shrink. You don't have to fight fire with fire. And you certainly don't have to let their negativity define your world. In the next few minutes, I will share with you the smartest way to deal with toxic people, an approach rooted in unshakable self-worth, strategic boundaries, and a mindset shift that puts you squarely in the driver's seat of your own life. Together, we'll learn how to disarm criticism with compassion, how to reclaim your peace without losing your kindness, and how to turn every encounter with toxicity into an opportunity for growth. Are you ready to take the reins of your emotional battlefield? Let's step forward, confident, clear, and courageously unafraid. Because your power isn't measured by how you handle this sunshine, but by how brilliantly you shine through the storm. Finding your worth begins with a simple shift in awareness. You are not defined by someone else's opinions, criticisms, or projections. From the moment you recognize that your value is inherent and non-negotiable, you erect an internal fortress that shields you from the corrosive effects of toxic energy. This realization isn't a one-time epiphany. It's a daily recommitment to reminding yourself that your identity, your talents, and your right to kindness exist independently of external validation. When you start each day by affirming, even silently, that you are enough as you are, you lay the groundwork for unshakable confidence. To cultivate this awareness, you can begin by examining your self-talk. Notice the language you use when you encounter difficulties or criticism. Does it lean towards self-judgment? Phrases like, "I'm not good enough," "They're right," "I'm flawed," or "I always fail." Rewriting these mental scripts is essential. Instead of allowing a toxic comment to replay in your mind unchecked, intervene with counterstatements. I choose to learn from this. My worth doesn't diminish because someone else feels threatened, or I will treat myself with the compassion I deserve. Over time, these counterstatements become automatic, replacing doubt with confidence. Another powerful practice is journaling your achievements and positive qualities every day. Set aside 5 minutes each morning or evening to write down 3 things you did well, 3 personal strengths you exhibited, or 3 moments when you felt proud of yourself. This exercise builds a written record of your competence and character, which you can revisit whenever someone's negativity attempts to shake your foundation. The tangible evidence of your own history of success and integrity serves as an antidote to any toxic remark that tries to rewrite your story. Visualization can also reinforce your sense of worth. Imagine yourself standing tall in a space where negativity bounces off you like water off a duck's back. See yourself responding calmly to a critical coworker, a passive-aggressive family member, or a manipulative friend, and observe how you remain centered, unshakable. Each time you replay this mental movie, your nervous system learns that you are capable of meeting toxicity with the strength of your self-respect. This neurological rehearsal primes you to act with confidence when real challenges arise. Toxic people often sense when someone is unsure of themselves, and they exploit any perceived vulnerability. By contrast, when your worth comes from within, it cannot be eroded by someone else's attempts to stir insecurity. This doesn't mean you never feel hurt or upset. It means you have a secure base from which you can process those emotions without losing sight of your value. When a toxic comment lands, you might feel a momentary sting, but your core belief, "I am valuable," remains intact. A brief pause A deep breath and a reminder of your journaled strengths are all it takes to recalibrate. Guarding your worth also involves curating your environment. Surround yourself with affirming influences, people who celebrate your successes and encourage your growth, books that uplift, podcasts that inspire, and habits that nourish your mind and body. Just as you would avoid spending time in a polluted physical setting, limit exposure to environments and relationships that continually degrade your spirit. The selective curation sends a clear message to yourself: you deserve respect, kindness, and positivity. Mindfulness and meditation can strengthen your connection to self-worth by anchoring you in the present moment. When you focus on your breath, your body sensations, or the sounds around you, you step out of the self-critical narrative and into a state of non-judgmental awareness. This pause creates space between an external comment and your internal reaction, giving you the freedom to choose a response that aligns with your self-respect rather than an automatic emotional knee-jerk. Aligning your daily actions with your deepest values is another cornerstone of owning your worth. Identify what matters most to you: integrity, creativity, compassion, excellence, and let those values guide your decisions. When you act in congruence with your values, you reinforce the belief that your choices are meaningful and that you deserve to live a life that reflects your highest ideals. This alignment fuels a feedback loop. The more you live your values, the more your worth feels undeniable, and the less room there is for toxic influences to take root. Assertive communication grows naturally from a secure sense of worth. When you know your needs and your right to have them met, you can express boundaries clearly and calmly. You might say, "I understand you're upset, but I need you to speak to me respectfully." Or, "I'm not comfortable continuing this conversation if it stays hostile." Notice that assertiveness isn't aggression. It's the honest declaration of your needs, backed by the conviction that you deserve to be heard and treated with dignity. This stance often diffuses hostility because it denies toxic individuals the satisfaction of seeing you crumble. Resilience builds on this foundation of self-worth. Each time you stand firm in your value, you reinforce neural pathways of confidence and courage. Over weeks and months, situations that once felt overwhelming become opportunities to demonstrate your inner strength. You learn not just to withstand toxic behavior, but to emerge from it with greater clarity about who you are and what you stand for. Resilience becomes woven into your identity so that even when you encounter extreme negativity, you know you will rebound. Your sense of worth also influences your broader relationships. Friends and colleagues pick up on your self-regard and mirror it back to you. When you project respect for yourself, others find it natural to respect you in return. Conversely, allowing toxicity to chip away at your confidence can lead you to accept lower treatment from others, perpetuating a cycle of disrespect. By taking ownership of your worth, you set a higher standard for how you were treated, and you give others permission to rise to that standard. Imagine a scenario where a colleague repeatedly undermines your ideas during meetings. If you approach the situation from a place of self-doubt, you might hesitate to speak up, smile through the criticism, or even second-guess your own proposals later. In contrast, when you own your worth, you can calmly reassert, "I stand by my suggestion because it aligns with our goals, and I'm happy to provide further details." You neither shrink nor attack. You simply convey that your contributions are valid and valuable. This practice extends to personal relationships as well. If a friend makes a sarcastic remark that stings, you don't have to laugh it off or apologize for feeling hurt. You can say, "That comment felt disrespectful to me. I'd appreciate it if we could speak more kindly." By naming your feelings and stating your needs, you reinforce the truth that your emotional well-being matters. Over time, even the most habitual critics learn that you no longer acquiesce to dismissive behavior. To keep owning your worth, incorporate daily rituals that reinforce it. Each morning before you open your phone or engage with anyone else, take a moment to ground yourself. Close your eyes, place a hand over your heart, and repeat a simple affirmation: I am worthy of respect, kindness, and love. Let that affirmation anchor you. As you go about your day, carry an internal reminder that you are not at the mercy of others' toxicity, but secure in the knowledge of your own value. Defining boundaries begins with recognizing that you have the right to protect your time, energy, and emotional well-being, and that toxic behavior crosses invisible lines if left unchecked. Boundaries are not walls to keep others out, but guidelines that clarify how you expect to be treated and what you will accept from those around you. When you establish clear limits, you create a predictable environment for yourself and others, signaling that your needs matter as much as theirs. Without these guardrails, toxic people can wander freely into your life, leaving you feeling drained and disoriented. To set strategic boundaries, start by identifying the specific behaviors that undermine your peace. Maybe it's frequent criticism veiled as advice, incessant demands on your time, or manipulative guilt trips that make you feel responsible for someone else's happiness. Write down concrete examples of what you will no longer tolerate, such as, I will not answer work emails after 7 p.m. I will not engage when someone uses name calling, or I will leave the room if a conversation turns into blame. Putting these statements in writing gives them weight. They become commitments you can hold yourself to when the moment of confrontation arrives. Next, hone the language you'll use to communicate your boundaries. Aim for statements that are assertive yet calm, taking ownership of your feelings without blaming or shaming the other person. For example, you might say, I feel overwhelmed when you call me multiple times during my work hours. After 6 p.m., I need uninterrupted time to recharge. This phrasing highlights your internal experience. I feel, rather than pointing a finger, you always, which reduces the chance of a defensive backlash. By focusing on your needs, you invite the other person to respect them rather than feeling attacked. When you deliver your boundary statement, choose a neutral moment if possible, an instance when emotions are already running high. A prepared, calm conversation increases the likelihood the other person will hear you. If you sense resistance or minimization, you're too sensitive, I'm only joking, stand firm. You might respond, I understand you don't see it that way, but this is important to me. My request still stands. Repeating your boundary calmly but consistently trains the other person to take you seriously rather than waiting for you to capitulate. Enforcing boundaries requires follow-through on consequences. Simply stating a limit without acting if it's crossed teaches toxic individuals that your words lack weight. Decide in advance what consequence you will implement if someone violates your boundary. Perhaps ending a call, walking away from a conversation, or temporarily muting them on social media. For instance, if a family member continues to criticize you after you've asked them to stop, you might say, I'm going to step away now. We can talk when things are more respectful. Then leave the room. This consequence isn't punitive. It's a natural response that preserves your integrity and signals that toxic behavior carries a price. Remember that enforcing boundaries doesn't make you unkind. It makes you self-respecting. Toxic people may attempt to guilt or shame you for protecting yourself, accusing you of being cold or uncaring. Recognize this as a classic manipulation tactic. When guilt arises, remind yourself that you're not responsible for other people's emotions at the expense of your own well-being. You can care about someone deeply while still refusing to tolerate treatment that erodes your confidence or joy. Your boundaries are acts of self-love, not aggression. Be prepared for a boundary to be tested multiple times. It's common for toxic individuals to push against new limits to see if they'll hold. Each time they violate a boundary, calmly enforce the predetermined consequence. Consistency is crucial. Wavering or negotiating lowers the boundary's effectiveness and may encourage further attempts to breach it. Over time, as you respond predictably, the other person learns that crossing your lines results in a loss of access to conversation, companionship, or collaboration. Until they adjust their behavior, boundaries extend beyond verbal agreements. You can curate your digital and physical spaces to reinforce your limits. Unfollow or mute social media accounts that regularly broadcast negativity. Block phones or email addresses if unwanted messages persist. And rearrange your environment so you share less time in close quarters with people who undermine you. Technology gives you unprecedented control over who can contact you and when. Use these tools strategically. Set do not disturb hours on your devices. Silence notifications during critical work or self-care times. And create designated spaces, physical or temporal, where you are off limits to toxic influences. Teaching others to respect your boundaries can also involve modeling the behavior you value. Show up for yourself first, arrive on time, speak honestly, leave conversations that turn toxic, and honor your own needs without apology. When someone sees you living by your own standards, they gain a roadmap for how you expect to be treated. You don't need to lecture or remind them constantly. Your consistent actions become the example. Over time, they internalize these cues and adjust their interactions accordingly. Finally, acknowledge that setting boundaries is an ongoing practice rather than a one-and-done event. Life circumstances change, relationships evolve, and new stressors emerge. Regularly revisit your boundaries to ensure they still serve your highest good. You might discover that a boundary you once needed no longer applies, or that new lines must be drawn in areas you hadn't considered before. Checking in with yourself through journaling, meditation, or conversation with supportive friends helps you stay attuned to your limits and maintain an environment that nurtures your growth. This continuous recalibration is the essence of strategic boundaries, empowering you to manage toxicity with intention rather than reaction, so that every interaction becomes an opportunity to honor your well-being and reinforce the respect you deserve. Responding with emotional intelligence is like learning to surf a wave of emotion rather than being thrown beneath it. When someone hurls toxic barbs your way, the instinct is to react, either by lashing back or recoiling in shame. But true power lies in the space between stimulus and response. That space is where you choose whether to let negativity hijack your heart or to hold on to your calm, clear center. Every time you choose deliberately, you reinforce a narrow pathway that says, I control my feelings, they don't control me. Over time, this choice becomes your default and toxicity loses its sting. To stay centered in the face of assault, begin by anchoring yourself in the present moment. Notice your feet on the ground, the rise and fall of your breath, the weight of gravity against your bones. These simple physiological cues are gates to your inner calm, reminding you that you exist beyond the toxic words aimed at you. When a surge of anger or hurt begins to rise, pause and take 3 measured breaths. Feel the air travel from your nostrils deep into your lungs and imagine the tension melting away as you exhale. This micro practice interrupts the automatic fight or flight response, giving your rational mind a chance to guide your next move. Listening without absorbing negativity is an art that hinges on empathic detachment. Picture yourself holding a protective glass shield. You can see and hear every venomous remark clearly, but the words bounce off rather than penetrating your core. To cultivate this, practice active listening. Lean forward slightly, maintain gentle eye contact, and acknowledge the speaker's emotion with a nod or a brief I see. As you do so, identify their underlying need. Are they seeking control, validation, or release of pain? When you name their emotions silently to yourself, I hear frustration or I notice fear. You disengage from feeling personally attacked and instead view the interaction as a human-to-human exchange. Once you've grounded yourself and listened without losing your equilibrium, choosing your reaction becomes a matter of deliberate intention. Before words escape your lips, mentally run them through a filter. Will this response honor my values? Will it escalate or diffuse the tension? You might think of this filter as a series of stoplights. Red for reactions born of anger, yellow for responses that need revision, and green for words aligned with your self-respect and long-term goals. When you speak from that green light zone, you communicate with clarity and authority, disarming hostility with the simple confidence of someone who refuses to be provoked. One practical tactic is to label emotions out loud. I'm noticing a lot of frustration in this conversation. This naming technique doesn't accuse the other person. Instead, it signals that you're aware of the emotional current and refuse to be swept away by it. After labeling, offer a neutral reframe. It seems like we both want to be heard. Let's pause to understand each other's perspective. This two-step move, label and reframe, shifts the dynamic from attack to collaboration, inviting the toxic party to step out of their drama and engage in a more constructive exchange. Imagine you're in a meeting and a colleague publicly undermines your proposal, casting doubt on your abilities. Instead of clenching your jaw or responding with biting sarcasm, you anchor yourself with a deep breath. Tune into their frustration and say, I appreciate your concerns. Could you tell me more about what's worrying you so I can address it directly? By doing so, you both validate their emotion and steer the conversation back to the substance of the work. You haven't allowed their negativity to become a defining narrative. You've seized control of the dialogue. In a personal setting, say a friend who constantly complains and criticizes, you might notice your heart rate spike as the same old grievances roll out. Rather than matching their complaint with one of your own or trying to outdo their negativity, you stay present. You say, I hear how upset you are and I want to support you, but these recurring criticisms make it hard for me to help effectively. Can we focus on one issue at a time? This statement is neither dismissive nor aggressive. It's a boundary reinforced by emotional intelligence. You've acknowledged their pain while redirecting the conversation towards solutions and mutual respect. Understanding the neurobiology behind emotional hijacks can deepen your practice. When you feel threatened, the amygdala fires up, pushing you toward impulsive reactions, but your prefrontal cortex, the seat of reason, can reassert control if given a moment. That's why those breathing pauses in self-talk scripts matter. They buy your brain the milliseconds needed to engage higher order thinking. Visualize the neurons in your prefrontal cortex growing stronger each time you choose calm over chaos. Each time you let reason outmuscle reactivity. Over days and weeks, those synaptic connections solidify, making emotional intelligence not just a strategy, but a natural habit. But building this skill is like training a muscle. Start small and incrementally increase the challenge. Practice emotional intelligence in low-stakes situations, perhaps with a distracted barista or a pushy salesperson, before deploying it with truly toxic individuals. Notice how your body and mind react as you apply your pause, breathe, label, reframe sequence. Celebrate each success, no matter how minor, and review any missteps without judgment. Use them as data points. What part of the process broke down? How can you reinforce your pause next time? This reflective loop accelerates your growth and reinforces the neural pathways of calm. Over time, responding with emotional intelligence transforms not just your interactions, but your self-concept. You cease to view toxic people as threats and instead see them as challenges that refine your inner strength and clarity. Each time you choose a measured response over an emotional outburst, you reinforce the belief that you are capable, composed, and unshakable. Toxicity no longer feels like a force that can pull you under. It becomes a catalyst for proving to yourself just how masterful you can be at steering your own emotional ship, no matter how rough the waters get. Every encounter with a toxic person can be more than a battle to endure. It can become a catalyst for profound personal growth. When you view negativity not as a permanent stain on your peace, but as a temporary challenge to elevate your character, you shift from a reactive stance to a proactive posture. Toxic interactions, while painful, illuminate the edges of your comfort zone and reveal hidden patterns in your thoughts and behaviors. They shine light on beliefs that no longer serve you, outdated coping mechanisms, and unexamined vulnerabilities. Rather than recoiling from discomfort, lean into it as you would a teacher with a tough lesson. Each moment of tension becomes a mirror, reflecting back subtle weaknesses and self-awareness, areas where resilience can be fortified, and opportunities to deepen empathy for yourself and others. Toxicity can also be a laboratory for experimentation, a place where you test the limits of patience, the elasticity of compassion, and the resolve of your values. This laboratory approach reframes toxicity from an adversary to a resource, a source of data about how you operate under stress, how you default in crisis, and where you can redesign your internal architecture to support a stronger, wiser self. Consider the last time a toxic individual triggered you into anger or self-doubt. In that flash of reactivity, what did you learn about your hot buttons? Maybe it was a fear of being disrespected, a wound from past criticism, or a belief that your worth depended on external approval. That insight is a treasure. Rather than chastising yourself for falling into old traps, celebrate the clarity that toxicity has delivered. Gratitude for this feedback loop transforms bitter experiences into constructive fuel. The more you practice gratitude for painful lessons, the less power toxicity holds, because you know it will pass and leave you stronger in its wake. Every toxic relationship or confrontation becomes a rite of passage, building muscle in your emotional core and flexibility in your perspective. Reflection is the bridge between experiencing toxicity and extracting growth. After an encounter that left you drained, mapping out the emotional trajectory can reveal flashpoints and recurrent themes. Carry a small notebook or use a notes app to jot down the scenario, your immediate reactions, and the long-term effects of the exchange. Over time, patterns emerge. Perhaps toxic people trigger you when you are tired, hungry, or facing separate stressors. Or maybe certain phrases or tones activate an old memory. Once you see these triggers, you can anticipate them and prepare mentally, reducing their impact. The act of writing itself externalizes toxic material from your mind, creating distance and enabling objective analysis. This practice of externalization is critical. It moves negativity from an internalized weight to an external case file you can examine with curiosity and compassion. Data-driven self-awareness becomes your compass, guiding you to set boundaries, deploy strategies, or seek support when needed. When you revisit your notes regularly, you chart a map of personal growth, witnessing your evolution from a reactive individual to a conscientious architect of your emotional well-being. By treating your emotional narrative as a living document rather than a static confession, you give yourself permission to revise beliefs that no longer serve you and to draft new chapters of resilience, empathy, and self-respect. Reframing toxic encounters is akin to alchemy, transforming lead into gold. Language shapes experience, so the words you choose to describe toxicity can either imprison or liberate you. Instead of labeling someone as horrible or destructive, consider describing the behavior as challenging communication or misaligned expectations. This linguistic shift doesn't excuse the toxicity, but separates the person from the problem, preventing you from being drawn into identity-based judgment. When you depersonalize toxic acts, you create the psychological space to explore root causes, such as insecurity, fear, or unmet needs in the other individual. You can then decide whether to empathize, educate, or extricate from the relationship. Reframing also works inwardly. Swap "I'm a victim of toxicity" for "I'm a student of resilience." This transition from victimhood to authorship places you in the driver's seat of your narrative. You move from passively suffering to actively curating your story, selecting which chapters to rewrite and which themes to leave behind. Furthermore, experimenting with different frames can reveal novel coping strategies. For instance, view a toxic insult as an uninvited gift, a blunt instrument that reveals cracks in someone else's armor and reminds you of your own integrity. Each reframing exercise broadens your repertoire of responses so that next time you face toxicity, you have an arsenal of mental models to draw upon. This intentional linguistic practice rewires your brain to seek meaning rather than blame, cultivating a durable